When it comes to Mario games, I've always found myself drawn more to the spin-offs rather than the mainline entries. It seems like Nintendo really safeguards their mainline Mario games while they let loose and have fun with their RPGs specifically. Paper Mario on N64 was just one of their attempts at a Mario-themed RPG, and it managed to be incredibly charming and inventive, eventually receiving a sequel on the GameCube that was even better. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is one of my favorite games on the system, and for a console generation as good as that one was, that's really saying something. These two games had such great premises behind them, as well as fun characters and worlds to explore for secrets. What really made them memorable was how good their comedic writing was, and there were even some darker moments thrown in to make the situations you were in feel legitimate. After these first two games though, things started going in a weird direction for the series, leaving longtime fans confused about its current form. There have been 3 more Paper Mario games since Thousand Year Door, 4 if you count Paper Jam, and each one has felt like more of a departure from the roots of the series. So today, let's look at how such a vibrant and funny series slowly lost its sense of identity over the years, and who made the decision that this even needed to happen. To begin with, what was Paper Mario? It was a turn-based RPG series starring Mario characters and its own paper take on the universe we've become familiar with. It featured its own timing-based battle system where you could hit buttons at the right time to reduce the damage you took and increase damage on your enemies. It had so many little interesting ideas that added up to make a memorable battle system with unique mechanics you'd expect a Mario game to bring to the table. For example, all of the unique ways you'd initiate different attacks by doing things like pulling back and releasing the analog stick at the right time kept things interesting, as you'd always have to pay attention to get those timing bonuses. As a kid, I always loved using the tattle ability on enemies, in which you'd learn about their stats and hear a funny line or two about what you were up against. I also spent hours running around collecting items and using them to cook up new types of food to use in battle that could only be obtained through learning recipes. It was just a really rewarding system that started out very simple, but built on top of itself with new allies, its badge system that gave you new abilities, and some really tough enemies with interesting ticks that you needed to think carefully about in order to take out. It was a very Mario take on turn-based RPG gameplay, which was great because they didn't just come to the table looking to do what everyone had already done before. They wanted to add their own flavor to the genre, which is why even out of combat it employed so many platforming and exploration elements, with abilities and items from combat playing a dual role in discovering secrets. The whole setup of the Thousand Year Door's combat taking place on a stage was very creative, and there were so many mechanics that sprouted up from this premise. Your special moves were powered by the reception of your audience, which would grow and shrink depending on how well you were doing in battle. Pieces of the set would even fall apart around you in response to heavy attacks, causing damage to everyone on stage and even your audience. Sometimes enemies would even be hiding among the crowd, throwing trash at you, or one of your fans would throw you an item that could help you out in a pinch. Some bosses would even eat and kill members of your audience to regain health as you push them towards defeat. See, that's what I loved about Paper Mario. It had the balls to be weird and dark at times, which sets it in sharp contrast to the later games we'll be discussing. In the Thousand Year Door, an evil organization supercomputer falls in love with Princess Peach and ponders the meaning of life while getting her to perform espionage for him, which requires her to concoct an invisibility potion and strip completely naked. I'm playing as a nude Princess Peach running around a secret base on the moon. The Nintendo of today would never let this happen, but that's what made Paper Mario so awesome! These first 2 games are the only entries in the series I can honestly say I'm a fan of, and from here, the series really started to lose its sense of direction and character. Super Paper Mario came out in 2007 for the Wii and was a huge departure from the previous games. Instead of being a turn-based RPG, they scrapped that entire aspect of the series and focused only on the exploration elements, with emphasis on an additional perspective shifting mechanic. I was 12 years old when this game came out, and even back then I thought it was a huge letdown. I know a lot of people do like this game, and even I wouldn't have a problem with it if it was just some one-off game that switched up the formula, but it isn't. From this point on, none of the games have tried to go back to the style of gameplay that worked and established the series. Instead, it's just been one gimmick after another, with Nintendo trying to come up with an easy premise to bank an entire game on instead of coming up with something of actual substance. Super Paper Mario is Paper Mario's shell, with everything that made it what it was gutted out. You just run around and jump on enemies like a normal Mario game, but with worse controls. At the same time, the world and characters are all just weird polygonal shapes that are extremely unappealing in my opinion. I get that this is supposed to be a weird alternate dimension, but I don't think that's an excuse for such a visually unappealing game. The Thousand Year Door looks like this game's sequel, not a game made 3 years earlier. So it's just a generally uninteresting platformer where characters constantly talk your ear off, which isn't that strong of a pairing. It's like those fighting games that try to have long visual novel style story segments. Even if I wanted to play a story-heavy platformer, I can think of many others that I'd rather be playing through. The game tries to base itself around this idea of switching from a 2D to 3D perspective to solve perception puzzles, but really, it's never that interesting, especially visually. If the game really popped to life when you switch to 3D, it would at least look cool, but instead, whenever you switch over, you find yourself in a long, empty void where enemies can't do anything to you, and everything is actually just a cutout on the side of the wall. Instead of having a colorful cast of funny characters by your side like in previous games, you now only have these things called pixels following you around. They allow Mario to use abilities he'd normally have on his own, like butt stomping and grabbing enemies, but now you need to select them one at a time through the use of pixels. They're all just polygonal shapes that remain quiet after you find them in a chest and get a brief introduction from them. The party members in past Paper Mario games were so much more interesting to have around, and their designs were really varied. Not only did you have franchise mainstays like Goombas being represented, but a lot of the characters had totally original designs that gave the Paper Mario universe its own identity. They all had their own personalities, backstories, and reasons for joining you on your journey. In Super Paper Mario, your teammates are things like a hand, who grabs things. This issue isn't fixed in the next entry's Sticker Star either. In this game, they tried to bring back the turn-based battle mechanics in the most hollow way possible. Now you get into really tensionless turn-based battles, but instead of just selecting attacks, you have to select stickers you find throughout the environment to use any of Mario's normal moves. The game has no party members to speak of whatsoever, and what's worse is, you don't even gain experience points from battle. That's right, this is a game with turn-based RPG battles, but with no experience points, no leveling up, and no one to play as except Mario himself. It's just you using stickers and hoping you don't die in battle. So tell me, why would you ever try to fight anything that wasn't mandatory? There are still enemies for you to get into random battles with, but it's completely pointless outside of getting a few coins, because it just means you're using up your stickers. And nothing is more frustrating than running out of stickers in the middle of one of the long boss battles, because the process of attacking was so easy in the original games. When this happens, you just have to let yourself die. This happened to me multiple times on the final boss, even after the super hype willpower moment where I was supposed to have a really satisfying victory. Having a finite resource as your only method of attack is a terrible idea, and that's why no other game does this. Why do I even need stickers to do the basic jump and hammer attacks Mario has always been capable of? This is such a simple, boring battle system, yet still such a poorly thought out one. Both Sticker Star and Super Paper Mario feel like they were rushed together to serve as early titles for the Wii and 3DS respectively. It's like Paper Mario became Nintendo an intelligent systems science experiment that they could throw some weird concept onto and push out to get some experience developing for these systems. Aesthetically, Sticker Star is a big improvement over Super Paper Mario, but the world feels even more uninspired and lifeless. Super might have been a bunch of weird shapes, but at least it was something new. Sticker Star is everything generic about the Mario universe, with everything that made Paper Mario's world interesting flushed out. Sticker Star actually took 3 years to develop, beginning in 2009 and releasing in 2012. The reason it took so long to make such an empty game is because they faced repeated pushback against their direction from Miyamoto himself. During the start of the project, they were making a game that was much more faithful to the Thousand Year Door's design, going back to the roots of the series after Super Paper Mario tried something different. But a year into development, Miyamoto played a demo for the game and took issue with it being so similar to its predecessors, calling it pretty much just a port of the Thousand Year Door. Maybe he was expecting something more like Super, or maybe something more gimmicky to showcase the features of the 3DS. Either way, that's not what Paper Mario was about, and it's an extremely poor choice to use to demonstrate the system's unique capabilities. Because we'll never get to see what this early demo was like, I can't speak to whether or not he was justified saying what he did. Maybe it really was just a carbon copy of Thousand Year Door with no new elements to combat. But maybe it was going to be a new story with the same general combat mechanics of Thousand Year Door, shrunk down to a portable size. To me, it seems like he just wanted to make something new for the sake of it, when really there's a lot you can do with the framework of the first two games to keep it fresh. Would it really even be a bad thing to get a very similar game to Thousand Year Door compared to what we actually got? so they came up with the idea for stickers in combat to give the game its own identity. He also told them to change the atmosphere, which I guess must have been a lot different than the milquetoast atmosphere it has now. Additionally, he told them from the beginning that the game would be fine without a story, and questioned if it really needed one. So he instructed them to make something less like the previous games, resulting in the boring gameplay we got, and he told them to make a game without much of a story, resulting in the completely generic series of events all the way up to its empty conclusion. But not only that, he instructed them to use only established characters from Super Mario World, meaning Toads, Toads, and more Toads. Maybe this was a reaction to how weird Super Paper Mario was, but conversely, the original designs and characters are what made the first two Paper Mario games stand out. There were Toads in those games, but they weren't just the generic multicolored Toads. They had their own personalities and designs to match them, and that's the same with the members of other species too. And you know what? Just a year before the game came out, Miyamoto played another demo for it and said it was boring! I agree, Miyamoto. I wonder if they ever had time to correct that. And for future reference, all of this guidance applies to Color Splash as well, and doesn't look to be changing anytime soon. In line with these requests from Miyamoto, Bowser is now the primary antagonist of all of the games. The first game had him as the main villain, but it was okay because not only did he have a ton of entertaining dialogue, but it was the first villain to start off the new franchise, so of course it was going to be the tried and true Bowser. Then the Thousand Year Door made the right choice of making him a secondary character who was still extremely entertaining. Catching up with his side of the story between chapters was always one of my favorite parts. And whenever Mario crossed paths with Bowser, great moments ensued. Now he's back as the villain of every game after Super Paper Mario, which is a game I could at least give credit to for going all out with the bizarre premise it did. And you know what? He's completely mute in Sticker Star because Bowser doesn't talk in the platformers. That means he can't talk in this game either. Now, he does talk for like a handful of lines in Color Splash, but the point still remains that he's completely uninteresting as a main antagonist. And they even removed what did make him interesting previously. He's just this blank slate generic bad guy now, the same way he's portrayed in any other Mario game where the main villain doesn't really matter. But a main villain should matter, and they should be interesting in a slower paced, story-focused series like this. Now it's just, Bowser got the thing, and he's so evil we gotta stop him. It's so uninteresting and played out. Every chapter in the first two Paper Marios had a more interesting antagonist than Bowser in these new games, and I'm not exaggerating at all. Remember Tubba Blubba from the original? This guy was an immortal monster who ate ghosts all day. You were tasked with defeating him by a bunch of boos who were sick of getting eaten, so you had to sneak around his castle, avoiding him, and trying to find his weakness because you couldn't damage him. Then it turned out his weakness was his heart that he locked away in a cave, so you had to escape from his body and do battle with his heart to defeat him. Even when the original Paper Marios didn't have you in combat, they still had you doing much more interesting things than what the newer games do. Sticker Star is just so boring and safe that I have no interest in playing it. I completed it and I feel like I got nothing out of it. It was a complete waste of time. Compare the wildly different locations of the first two Paper Marios to these standard desert and ice levels, leading up to Bowser's spooky castle we've seen a million times before. Just looking at the Thousand Year Door, every chapter had something unique to its location. From rising the ranks as a pro wrestler in Glitzville, to solving a mystery as a detective on the XS Express. Recruiting a team of sailors and then getting marooned on Keelhaul Key, and trying to save Twilight Town from a mysterious affliction turning them all into pigs. Do you remember this chapter? Near the end you fight a guy who copies your identity. Then after the fight is over, you find out you were the one getting hammered the whole time. Now there's this creepy Mario running around and all of your allies have turned against you. The only way to break his curse was to say his name, which was impossible even if you knew it because he locked the letter P away in his basement. This caused you to gain an entirely new ally named Vivian, who was one of the antagonists up until that point, but became disillusioned with their sister's goals because of their poor treatment. They aren't able to recognize Mario due to their identity being stolen, but due to their good nature, they help you explore new areas of Creepy Steeple that you weren't able to before. And thanks to their help, you're able to learn that the shapeshifter's name is Dupless, and with the missing letter P you found, you can now punch in his name, taking your identity back and saving the town, as well as gaining Vivian as a permanent ally. That's the kind of thought and justification the Thousand Year Door put in just to give you a new party member, and that's what made it great. This was 10 times as interesting as anything in these newer games with their super formulaic and low-stakes storylines. Even Rogueport, the main hub of the Thousand Year Door, was really interesting and different for a Mario game. The first thing you see when you enter the place is a noose right in the middle of the town square. Everyone there was sleazy and wanted compensation for their time. They all had this interesting edge to them, and you had to stay alert because you knew many of them were probably criminals. Mario is mugged almost immediately after entering town, and you had to go search for the thief if you wanted your money back. There was even a gang war going on behind the scenes, with one of the factions being a mafia-themed group of piantas, which was such a funny way of incorporating this new species from Sunshine. The setting was just ripe with comedic moments and gave you the opportunity to meet so many unusual characters from different walks of life. Sticker Star is just pure nothingness, and the same can be said about Color Splash, which we'll get to in a minute. This had to be my biggest problem with Nintendo during most of the Wii and Wii U's life cycle. They started playing things so safe. When I was young, I was a huge fan of Nintendo's games on the GameCube and Game Boy Advance because they took risks even if they didn't work out. There's nothing risky at all about stripping everything interesting out of Paper Mario so that it's just some shallow gimmick paired with paper-thin gameplay. Thankfully, Nintendo seems to be getting the message and attempting to switch things up more moving forward. Breath of the Wild, for example, isn't exactly original, but it's a nice switch up for a series that had gotten stagnant, and it's extremely enjoyable because of that. The thing is, who knows if anything like this will bleed down to Paper Mario, or if it would even help the series. It's a strange case where they've switched things up too much to the point where the series has lost its point in existing. It needs to go back and then take that original design in a new direction with an actual story. But who knows if that's even possible at this point. Nintendo made the conscious decision to stop making the Paper Mario games turn-based RPGs. Their reason being that the Mario and Luigi games are turn-based RPGs as well. Setting aside the fact that Paper Mario came out first, I don't see any reason why both of these can't be turn-based. They both play very differently and have their own sense of humor and presentation. They aren't even developed by the same companies, but I guess Nintendo saw it as redundant to have two different turn-based RPG spin-offs of Mario. In that case, I wouldn't really mind if they just stopped making Paper Mario games and stuck to the Mario and Luigi series. But why do they need to keep stringing up Paper Mario's dead body like a puppet and making it dance these lame-as-hell dances? Why does Mario and Luigi get to take place in creative new worlds with new characters, but Paper Mario's creativity was crippled by being forced to utilize only the most generic Mario universe characters possible over and over again? Now, Paper Mario is playing second fiddle to the Mario and Luigi games, even making a guest appearance in Mario and Luigi Paper Jam, like some sort of small-time YouTuber guest spotting on a bigger channel to try to get some attention. I don't have much to say about this game as it isn't really a Paper Mario title, just one featuring the character. It's another Mario and Luigi game, but with Paper Mario acting as a third character in battle, using his paper attributes to his advantage. The story is very simple. Luigi accidentally knocks over some book containing the entire Paper Mario universe, which causes all of the generic Mario iconography of Sticker Star to spill over into their world. I guess we're supposed to assume Paper Mario isn't even just an uninteresting world now, it's a world that only exists within another series of Mario RPGs. Now, both Normal and Paper Bowser are teaming up alongside their minions, resulting in battles involving both types of enemies. Having Paper Mario on your side against both kinds of enemies makes combat a hell of a lot more interesting than Sticker Star, and more importantly, you don't have to use stickers to attack, and you can actually gain experience from battles. This actually feels closer to original Paper Mario gameplay than the last handful of actual Paper Mario games, but that's just because they never randomly decided to strip down the Mario and Luigi games the way they did with Paper Mario. The game is still pretty safe when it comes to its character's story and setting, featuring twice as many Toads now that the two worlds are combined, but it actually has something going for it with its gameplay. It's really unfortunate that what could be considered a pretty forgettable Mario and Luigi game is actually a standout title for recent Paper Mario. The experience of playing this game doesn't feel like a complete waste of time the way Sticker Star did, which was a breath of fresh air as I went about playing all of these games for this video. You could probably try to justify Sticker Star's blandness by saying it's just a portable game, so they wanted to play it safe for kids. But Color Splash for the Wii U is a return to the same gimmicky combat and hollow experience, this time with cards instead of stickers. Yes, Color Splash is a sequel to Sticker Star in every sense of the word. It's the Phantom Pain to Sticker Star's Peace Walker. Instead of a talking sticker, you tag along with a talking paint can. Instead of collecting stickers to use as attacks, you collect battle cards in Paint. It's the same skill-less, bland, turn-based battle system Sticker Star used, but with an even more monotonous system for attacking. Every single time you want to attack, you need to scroll through your cards, drag them into the middle of the screen, then select OK, then paint them, then select OK, then swipe them to the top of the screen, and then, after a few seconds, Mario attacks and then you do it over again. This paint system is just weird. You have two hammers now, one that splatters paint, which you use to color in the overworld for coins, and another that just hits stuff. Hitting things in the environment gives you globs of paint, which you can then use to paint your cards. The only thing you really get from battles are these little hammers that eventually increase the total amount of paint you can hold. I guess this counts as a type of experience system? Can't say I ever ran out of paint though, plus some cards are just already painted, and you can get more paint before each battle by smacking stuff in the environment. Honestly, I never really used coins for anything either. It's just an incredibly easy and repetitive game. It doesn't take any thought to win battles. All I was considering when picking my attacks was how I could end it in my first turn so I wouldn't have to keep playing it. Since there's no real incentive to battle, the game instead forces you into mandatory fights so you have no say in the matter. That's always fun. Just guess what the story is for this game. All the Shy Guys are sucking the paint out of the world, and Mario has to get the paint stars to return the color and defeat Bowser, who's using the power of black paint. Do you think it took them more than 10 minutes to come up with this premise? The story is what drives you forward in a game like this. You want to see what happens next and defeat the villains. I do not care what happens in the story of Color Splash, because I know it's very conceptualization, and the intent of the creators leaves no possibility for something interesting to happen. I can't think of a more uninspired storyline than this in Sticker Stars. Hey guys, we have this paper series. Let's make a game where Bowser gets the evil scissors and is cutting up the world. Then Mario needs to team up with a talking roll of tape with eyes to tape the world back together. Originally, the whole paper aspect of the series was nothing more than an art style choice. In Japan, the original Paper Mario is just called Mario Story. It was a Mario adventure being told through a storybook aesthetic. Then in the Thousand Year Door, Mario would get cursed by evil spirits and gain paper-like abilities that played into the paper theme in a clever fourth wall breaking fashion. Even Super Paper Mario only really used the paper theme to play into its perspective manipulation gameplay. Now it's like paper is all this series is, like this is the paper equivalent to Kirby's Epic Yarn or Yoshi's Woolly World. That isn't what the series was at all. It was a game that looked like paper. Now it's paper that they cobbled a game premise around. Just look at the names of these games. Sticker Star, Paper Jam, and Color Splash. It's so lazy. This highlights a fundamental difference in what these games are. The Thousand Year Door actually meant something. It was what the story was about. It wasn't just called the Kooky Confetti Conundrum or some other dumb arts and crafts themed title. Give me something with some real substance or don't even bother. But Bit, it's just a kid's game. So were the first two games, but they both had engaging storylines that I appreciated as a kid and even recently replaying them for this video. All of these games have the same ESRB rating, so it's not like Color Splash is extra unremarkable for the sake of appealing to an even younger demographic. But I would never give a kid a game this lackluster, because as entertainment, it isn't something anyone gains anything from experiencing. At most you turn it on, zone out, and let it eat up your time, but wouldn't you rather be working on your huge backlog of good games instead? Just play the originals. Nearly every single character is some sassy toad that constantly makes ironic fourth wall breaking quips about their existence as pieces of paper. It's really strange and really annoying. The game wants desperately to be funny, but all it can do is say, paper, haha, get it? Paper! We're all paper! I'm creased, bro! Flatten me out! Mario himself was never much of a character, but the games could fall back on the many other characters that tagged along with him to keep scenes interesting. In these newer games, they don't really get that luxury. Yeah, the luxury of interesting characters. So the humor relies almost entirely on random toads being weird, and your single ally that follows you around the entire game commenting on how weird the toads are being. It leaves a lot to be desired. There's just something about the style of writing in this game that feels really inauthentic, like it's only ironically putting up with its own existence. This feeling is hard to describe, but all I can say is that I don't enjoy this game's style of writing, and I don't believe I'm in a world that these characters actually live in. Like, the entire time the game is just going, wink wink, nudge nudge. This is stupid, right? I can understand why people would appreciate the graphics in Color Splash, but personally, they don't do anything for me. I don't find the world presented in this game to be interesting, so I'm not drawn in by its art style choice the same way I was in the older ones. Aside from that, I just want to briefly complain about how these games haven't changed the designs for Mario or any of the other mainstay characters and enemies since the Thousand-Year Door. Sure, there's something to be said about these designs being the iconic Paper Mario appearances for these characters, but there's also something to be said about using the exact same art assets for 5 games now. 64 and the Thousand-Year Door had very different art styles, and I like that they both have their own look going on. But ever since the Thousand-Year Door, they've just kept reusing the same looks, which just feels lazy and uncreative. Each time they reuse this stuff, it takes away from what made the Thousand-Year Door special, when it should be getting credit for reinventing its look in the way it did. I guess in Color Splash, Mario has a white outline now. Like, now not only is he paper, but whoever cut him out was sloppy and left a ton of white space? Is this an analogy for the game's development? You tell me. With all this in mind, I can only draw one conclusion here. This series is stagnant and it isn't going anywhere anymore. It had a short but good run, but it's been completely drained of its appealing elements. It's been 13 years since the Thousand-Year Door, so I think they've been trying and failing for long enough. If they're gonna continue driving this series into the ground, they need to just stop. Stop making these games if you have no actual ideas or concepts you want to realize. We don't need more boring adventure games with a Paper Mario aesthetic. While Miyamoto deserves a ton of respect for his accomplishments, I think that he's done this for so long that he's developed a very rigid view on how games in his franchises should be made. It's like he's so old now, he just doesn't want anyone screwing up his legacy before he dies, and I can understand that. At the same time, he should respect that when he lets other people direct spin-offs in his franchises, in different genres, those games are going to be catered to those genres with their fans in mind. A major reason RPG fans play these games is to experience a good story, and Paper Mario had that as well as a ton of great mechanics that made them so memorable. People were not playing Paper Mario because they liked paper, or toads. They were playing for that type of storytelling and that style of gameplay. To uproot the series and not turn back for 3 or 4 games is a betrayal to the fans who supported and loved the series for those first few entries. I really don't think Miyamoto is inherently wrong about the philosophies he expressed to the Sticker Star team. I just think they were a poor fit for Paper Mario, and the series has suffered for that. Even the producer for Color Splash agrees there's nowhere else to go with this newer structure. He says if they're gonna make another one, they're probably gonna take it in a different direction. Does that mean they're gonna return or depart even further from the roots of the series? The first 2 games will continue to be remembered for years to come, while these new games will be rightfully forgotten like the release schedule filler they are. Are they terrible games that the developers should feel bad for making? No, not really. They're just criminally uninspired and dull, especially compared to what you expect from a game in this series. And if the staff behind these games has been shuffled around so much that now everyone working there really wants to make this style of game instead, then fine, but don't use Paper Mario's face and name to do it. Make something new, that way I won't feel obligated to play or talk about your completely lackluster products.